I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. We're bringing you team coverage from the Middle East to Washington as the fighting continues. Let's begin with NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez, who joins us from Ashkelon in southern Israel. So, Raf, just walk us through what it is you are seeing on the ground right now. What's the latest on the fighting that's happening within Israel?
Yeah, Joe, well, we are at the site of the latest rocket to fall inside of Israel. This rocket came down just about an hour ago. You can see the back of this car is just absolutely riddled with shrapnel. And if Dave Copeland's, my camera operator, can turn around here, you can see, Joe, this is the impact site where the rocket went down into the concrete. And the miracle here, Joe, is that literally 10 feet away from this rocket, and some sort of fuel tanker. You can see its windscreen shattered by the shrapnel, but almost miraculously, the fuel tank itself did not explode. Now, as you said, the Israeli military says this morning that it is once again in full control of Israeli towns and communities along the Gaza border, which is very significant because for the first 48 hours or so after this surprise attack, Israel could not say that it controlled its own territory. There were still Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad fighters controlling streets, buildings, in some cases, whole neighborhoods of Israeli towns. The Israeli military says they are now fully in control. There is still fighting inside of Israel, but they say it is sporadic. They do not, Joe, seem to have managed to fill in the breaches in the Gaza border fence, and it does appear that Palestinian fighters are still making it through.
So, Raf, we are also watching the scenes inside Gaza that show buildings being flattened by the relentless Israeli airstrikes. And now we're hearing Israel is imposing a full blockade on the Palestinian enclave. Just walk us through the latest of what's happening in Gaza.
Yeah, Joe, we are a little more than 10 miles from Gaza here, and we can hear the relentless boom as Israeli aircraft are overhead. They have been carrying out hundreds of airstrikes, and this morning the Israeli defense minister is saying he has placed Gaza under siege. There is no electricity going in, there is no fuel going in, and there is no food going in. That is according to the Israeli defense minister, Yoav Gallant. He says that Israel is fighting what he calls human animals and will act accordingly. Now, Joe, we should be really, really clear about this. There are 2 million Palestinian civilians inside Gaza. It is one of the most densely populated places on earth. These are people who live under Hamas control, but they are not part of Hamas. They have no say in what's going on here. And if it is the case that Gaza is without electricity, without fuel, it is those people who will be suffering right now. Officials inside Gaza say more than 400 Palestinians, including a very large number of children, have been killed so far in these Israeli airstrikes. The Israeli military says it is only targeting military targets, and it is doing everything it can to spare civilians. Jeff.
So, Raf, the question now, any indication just how far this conflict is going to go? So many believe that we're going to see some sort of ground operation into Gaza, but at the same time, we know one of the big issues is those dozens of hostages who were taken from Israel into Gaza. That presents another issue.
Yeah, Joe, so just on the prospect of a ground offensive, the Israeli military has not confirmed anything. They say all options are on the table in terms of what comes next. But I can tell you, in the 2+ days that we have been reporting on this, we have seen a near endless column of Israeli tanks, armored vehicles, artillery moving south towards the Gaza border. Every indication from what we can see with our own eyes is that Israel is preparing for a large-scale ground offensive. The Israeli military this morning saying they have called up 300,000 reservists, which is a number that you don't call up unless you are planning a very, very large operation. Just think about it, Joe. To take 300,000 people out of the workforce has a potentially devastating impact on the Israeli economy, but the Israeli government has decided it is necessary for security reasons. You may be able to hear the booms, Joe, from Gaza. Now, in terms of the hostages, this is perhaps the most complex hostage rescue operation that the world has ever seen. Hamas is saying today that 4 Israeli hostages have been killed by Israeli bombardment inside of Gaza. That is not something NBC News has been able to independently confirm, but it speaks to the great fear that Israel has, which is that as it carries out this military operation, it may be putting its own hostages in harm's way. Joe, we just came from speaking to a man. His name is Yoni Asher, his wife Doron, his 2 little girls, ages 5 and 3, were at their grandmother's house in southern Israel on Saturday morning when these Hamas militants stormed into the kibbutz that they're living. Joe, he was able to track his wife's cell phone movements, her iPhone, and he saw that cell phone moving from the site of her grandmother's house into Gaza, and he does not know where his family is today. Joe.
I cannot imagine what that man is going through right now. Raf, as always, we appreciate your reporting. You and your crew, please continue to stay safe. We want to bring in Barak Shmuel. He joins us now. He's originally from Colorado, is currently living in Israel, is a survivor of the attacks. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. We are glad you're safe. First, I just want to ask, how are you doing right now?
Wow. There's so many emotions at once. There's mainly just a bunch of adrenaline, fear. It's too much to control.
I want to walk through what happened on Saturday morning. You stayed locked in your place, in your home by yourself when those attacks first broke out. And you say you saw videos of the violence online. How did you realize what was happening, what was going through your mind as the violence started to unfold on Saturday?
For me, the first rockets caught me outside of my house. I was on my way to I was with my friends. We were going to work out. And then when I got home after running from rockets, I opened my phone and all of a sudden I see these videos of terrorists running around the street. And at first, to be completely honest, I laughed. I thought it was a joke because it really does not seem real. And then it just kept on coming. And I understood that the situation is legit. And in that exact moment, completely shut down. I went into a safety mode. I locked my house completely, and just since then, it's just been on just a feeling of uncertainty of how it's going to continue.
I understand that you lost a friend in this. One of your friends was killed. I'm so sorry to hear that. What happened? What should we know about that?
Do not want to go too much into detail. He was a surfer. He went to go surf in the morning. And when I got home in that same morning, I saw the messages that he was missing. And then later that night, we heard that he was killed.
I'm so sorry to hear about this loss. I know so many people have been impacted. So many people have lost loved ones or don't know where their loved ones are right now. I understand your mother was actually out of the country when the violence broke out. You've been able to talk with her since then, right?
Yes, sir. I was alone for the first 28 hours of the whole war. And I just kind of just made sure I was safe, talked to family, made sure everyone was okay, just did whatever I could do in the situation to keep myself in as good as a position as I can. Now my mother has returned. She came on an emergency flight from Italy, and luckily we are together, but the feeling is still there. Bunch of booms going on. It's just unreal. What
is your hope at this time? This could be a long and difficult war, as the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said. What are you hoping happens moving forward?
On the big picture, I just hope that it'll just return to how life's supposed to be. But this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. Things take time, but we will be okay. I have no doubt in my mind. This is our country. We're here to stay. And the civilians are doing what they can to help the soldiers. myself, I have gone and I've been collecting food around the city and clothing for soldiers to bring them supplies. And I just hope that the casualties will stop and that, I'll be able to live my normal life.
Barak Shmuel, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're glad you're okay. We're glad you've been reunited with your mom, and we are thinking about you, your family at this time.
Thank you.
Let's take a closer look at how America is responding. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us now with more on this. Gabe, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer confirmed that at least 4 American deaths so far. What more can you tell us about that? And what has been President Biden's reaction to these attacks?
Hi there, Joe. Good morning. Well, U.S. lawmakers got an unclassified phone briefing late last night. And as you said, according to 3 sources familiar with the call, at least 4 Americans are among the dead, and that number is expected to rise. Now, President Biden over the weekend spoke with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, and the president giving his full-throated support for Israel when he spoke here at the White House on Saturday. Let's take a listen.
We will not ever fail to have their back. We'll make sure that they have the help their citizens need and they can continue to defend themselves. Israel has the right to defend itself and its people. Full stop. There's never justification for terrorist attacks. And my administration's support for Israel's security is rock solid and unwavering.
Now, Joe, a message that the president and the White House stressed over the weekend is that they are warning any enemies of Israel not to take advantage of any perceived vulnerability here to attack Israel. And this all comes as the Biden administration is scrambling to make sure that this conflict does not escalate into a broader war across the Middle East.
Yeah, and Gabe, that brings up the topic of Iran right now. We're hearing from Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He was asked about whether Iran played any role in these attacks. What is he saying about that and any possible motives at this time?
Well, Secretary of State Antony Blinken over the weekend says that the administration has not yet seen evidence linking Iran directly to this attack. Now, there was some reporting over the weekend, the Wall Street Journal citing sources with Hamas and Hezbollah, saying that Iran helped plot these attacks over the last couple of weeks. But 3 U.S. officials tell NBC News that they have not yet seen any evidence to corroborate that report. Still, there are also questions about the motivation for this attack, and the Secretary of State said over the weekend that something that may have played a role is, of course, the recent talks between Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the U.S. to try and broker an agreement to normalize relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Here is the Secretary yesterday responding to a question about that.
It's entirely possible that one of the motivations for this attack was to try to derail these efforts to advance normalization, something that is very hard. There are a lot of really challenging issues to work through. We're in the process of trying to do that. But the result would be, if we were able to get there, a much different path for the region and for the future.
And, Joe, critics of the Biden administration have suggested without evidence that those $6 billion in Iranian oil revenues that were unfrozen several weeks ago in exchange for those 5 American citizens, those critics are saying that that perhaps may have been used to fund at least part of this attack. That is something that the Biden administration is pushing back very strongly against, calling it misinformation. Joe?
Gabe, let's talk about some of the movement that's taking place in the Mediterranean. We know the U.S. military is moving an aircraft carrier strike group plus aircraft closer to Israel. What should we know about that? How involved is the U.S. going to get in this conflict?
Right there, you see it on your screen, Joe. The U.S. is sending several military assets, including the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier, also several guided missile destroyers to the eastern Mediterranean, as you mentioned. And this is seen as potentially to having a deterrent effect. It's also a show of force. But the goal is here, again, to try and prevent other actors, other enemies of Israel from taking advantage of the situation. The White House, again, again, trying to prevent this from escalating into a wider conflict. Joe?
All right. Gabe Gutierrez at the White House. Gabe, thank you so much. We have some new information, and we want to share with you a statement just released from Israel. The Air Force now launching an extensive attack on many centers of the terrorist organization Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Let's stay in Washington as we continue our coverage and take a closer look at how lawmakers are reacting. We're joined by NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale. Ali, good morning. So we know there's this bipartisan group of senators in Beijing right now where Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer met with the Chinese foreign minister. What's he saying about how China is reacting to the attacks in Israel?
Well, look, Schumer, of course, condemning these attacks writ large, but also saying that he didn't necessarily appreciate or like the way that the Chinese responded. Listen to a bit of Senator Schumer, the top Democrat overseas right now on a congressional delegation visit. Watch.
The ongoing events in Israel over the past few days are horrific. I urge you and the Chinese people to stand with the Israeli people and condemn these cowardly and vicious attacks. I was very disappointed, to be honest, by the foreign ministry statement that showed no sympathy or support for Israel during these troubled times.
So you heard there, of course, Schumer saying he was disappointed by the reaction of the Chinese foreign minister to what's happening in Israel right now. But the fact that Schumer and several of his Senate colleagues are overseas underscores the idea that we're not going to see them in Washington this week. That does make it slightly more difficult for them to get the kinds of classified briefings that many senators want in these kinds of settings. They have been briefed in an unclassified fashion, of course. Those are likely to continue, but we're not going to see senators back in town, at least at this point, until next week.
And Ali, on top of that, Congress currently acting without a House Speaker at the moment after Kevin McCarthy was ousted last week. So it's still going to be at least a few more days before a new Speaker is elected. How are lawmakers able to move forward with aid without a House Speaker? Lay out what some of the challenges could be here.
They're probably not going to be able to move forward with aid, at least as things stand right now, because although there is an acting speaker, a speaker pro tempore in Patrick McHenry, that he is largely powerless in running the House floor. He can open it, he can close it. That means he can slam a gavel in and out, but he can't bring resolutions to the floor. For example, we've heard from some lawmakers who want to put forward a resolution condemning Hamas. That's likely to garner a lot of bipartisan support, but in terms of actually bringing something as simple as that to the floor, it's not clear that McHenry right now has the power to do that. It's important to remember, too, that all of this is being played out in real time. You've never had a speaker pro tempore in this instance before. It was the first time just a few days ago that we saw a Speaker of the House ousted from that role. So all of this is really being tried and tested in real time here and under seriously stressful and tense conditions. You have to imagine that a resolution is the least that the House is going to want to do. There's going to come a point where there's a real conversation about sending more aid. You can't do that unless you change the landscape in the House. There is some talk potentially of electing McHenry to this role so that he has those powers, even on a temporary basis. But I have to tell you, I talked to a Democratic lawmaker this morning who sort of panned the idea and demurred at the idea that there could be a bipartisan way of doing that even at this point.
Ali, I quickly want to ask you about what's happening on the Senate side. Despite the ongoing violence in Israel, Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville still not backing down on his one-man, months-long block of hundreds of military promotions. Could that change it all here?
Sounds like it's not going to change. And even though the current landscape has become even more dire in terms of the U.S. needing to have key commanders in positions like the ones that Gabe was talking about, moving some of those fleets in, they need some of these positions to be confirmed because as of now, they're vacant. To go through them one by one, again, I think we need to remind, would take hours that the Senate doesn't have. Again, the Senate is not even in this week, but Tuberville doesn't sound like he's backing down on this hold. And even with the changing circumstances overseas, it sounds like he's holding fast.
All right, Ali Vitale in Washington. Ali, thank you so much. Let's bring in Avi Mayer. He is the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. Avi, we appreciate having you with us. You've been very helpful over the last 48 hours as we've been trying to report on what's happening inside Israel. I know your newspaper, the Jerusalem Post, has been under cyber attack since this started. Talk about why you think your paper is a target and how this is impacting your ability to report, but also to get information to people who desperately need it right now.
Well, as you said, our paper has been under constant attack since Saturday morning. Since this assault was launched at 6:22 a.m., we've been under fairly constant assault. That continues at this time. Our website has been on and offline alternately over the past 48 hours or so. We believe that this is a sustained effort to keep Israel and keep Israeli citizens from telling their side of the story, from bringing the reality on the ground to the world. We have encountered this before. It has been directed by state actors. We can't confirm whether that's the case here, but it is a very serious effort indeed. We have very, I think, robust cyber defenses, and they've managed to overwhelm those, which indicates that this is a very serious effort to ensure the truth is not getting out there. Of course, we will not let that deter us. We remain active on all social media platforms, and we're doing whatever we can to get our website back online in order to ensure that our audience is kept informed around the clock.
I want to ask you about an opinion piece you wrote. You referred to the attack as Israel's 9/11. You're not the only person to say that over the past 48 hours. For you, why is it important to make that comparison?
Look, I was a high school senior on September the 11th, 2001 in the D.C. area. And I remember that sense of chaos and confusion, not knowing whether people were alive or dead, where the next attack was going to come from. And that is very much what Israelis are feeling today, but in orders of magnitude even worse. If you can understand, Israel is a very small country, under 10 million people. 700 are the equivalent of about 7 9/11s when adjusted for proportion. That is an unimaginable number of people who have been killed. So there's not a single family in Israel that hasn't been touched by this in some way, that doesn't have a family member that's been lost, or a neighbor, a loved one, a colleague. The country is in mourning, and that is exactly what we are encountering today, alongside, of course, the tremendous sense of uncertainty about whether loved ones are alive or indeed being held by Hamas. There have been horrific images of elderly men and women being taken captive by Hamas. Young children have been seen in the Gaza Strip being taunted by Palestinians on the street. It is absolutely devastating and quite terrifying for Israelis who don't know whether they'll ever see their loved ones alive again.
Just like 9/11, this was such a surprise. What do you make of the Israeli government's response to this so far? Do you think there'll be any shakeups in the military because of the intelligence failures here leading up to it?
Well, there will absolutely have to be a commission of inquiry. This is Israel's worst military and intelligence disaster, I think, ever. Perhaps on par with the Yom Kippur War and those who are saying that it is actually worse. There will certainly be a commission of inquiry. I assume that certain people will be taken to account. Right now, though, the country is united in the effort to first recover those Israelis who have been taken hostage by Hamas, and then to deal a devastating blow to Hamas and its leadership for challenging Israel in this way, for invading Israeli territory in such a heinous manner, murdering so many Israelis. There is very broad support for such an effort. As your correspondent mentioned earlier, 300,000 Israelis have already been called up for reserve. That is a tremendous, tremendous number, which indicates that there is going to be a military assault targeting Hamas and its infrastructure. We hope that this will be a fairly short campaign, but there are no guarantees. The goal here, again, is twofold: to bring those Israelis home, the innocent men, women, and children who are being held by Hamas, held hostage at this time, while dealing Hamas a devastating blow that it will never forget, and ensuring that it is not able to carry out such a dreadful attack ever again.
Something we, of course, never want to see repeated. Avi Meir, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to you and your colleagues for your relentless reporting during this time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.